She's a fraud and everyone in this city knows it." My mother-in-law said that loud enough for the entire waiting room to hear. I didn't look up from my phone. I just smiled at my daughter Lily, who was sitting next to me drawing a butterfly in her notebook, completely unaware that the woman across the room had just tried to erase everything I'd spent 8 years building. Let me tell you something about myself. I'm the kind of person who keeps receipts. Every email, every contract, every voicemail. I learned that lesson the hard way, sitting in a parking garage at 26 with a newborn in the back seat and $43 in my checking account, wondering how someone who loved me could leave me with absolutely nothing. But that's a story I'll get to. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is that when my mother-in-law stood up in that waiting room and called me a fraud, the attorney sitting beside me, a man who had handled corporate litigation for 22 years, leaned over and whispered, "Do you want to respond?" I said no. Because I already knew what was coming. I had known for 3 weeks. I need to take you back to the beginning, to the Saturday morning that changed everything. Lily turned 6 in April. 6 years old, obsessed with butterflies and strawberry cake, and a TV show about a girl who solves mysteries with her dog. For 3 months, she had been talking about her birthday party. She helped me pick the invitations, little purple envelopes with butterflies on the front. She wrote her name on every single one with a blue crayon, pressing so hard the letters were slightly raised. We invited 11 kids from her class, 2 from the neighborhood and family. Family meant my husband's parents, his brother Marcus and his wife Sandra, and his grandmother who we called Nana Ruth. My own mother had passed 2 years before. My father lived in Phoenix and had already sent Lily a card with a gift card inside, apologizing that he couldn't make the trip. I understood. He was 71 and the flight was hard on his knees. My husband's name was Victor. I'll call him that because that's his name, and I'm not interested in protecting him anymore. Victor and I met when I was 24, at a conference in Chicago. He was charming in the way that men who have never been told no tend to be charming. Effortlessly, carelessly, like warmth was something he could turn on and off without noticing the temperature change for anyone else in the room. I was young enough to find that magnetic. I spent the next few years learning it was a warning sign. We had Lily 2 years into our marriage. Things were fine for a while. Then Victor's startup, a logistics software company, started having serious cash flow problems. And a version of him I had only seen in flashes became the full-time version. Cold. Defensive. Quick to remind me that his family had money and mine did not. His family had money because his father, Gerald, had spent 40 years building a regional medical supply distribution company. They were not billionaires, but they were the kind of wealthy that insulates you from reality, in ways you stop noticing after the first generation. His mother, Helen, had never worked outside the home. She was the kind of woman who described her daily schedule as busy, and meant it sincerely. Though if you asked her what she'd done, she would say lunch, a hair appointment, and a call with her decorator. Helen had never liked me. I was too direct. She once told Victor, as if directness was a character flaw rather than a professional survival skill. I was a financial analyst at a mid-sized consulting firm when Victor and I got married. 3 years later, I had been promoted twice and was managing a team of 7. Helen referred to my job as that number thing you do, usually while describing Sandra's part-time work at her mother's boutique as Sandra's incredible entrepreneurial journey. I want you to understand the dynamic before I tell you about Lily's birthday. Because context matters. This was not a family that suddenly became cruel on a random Saturday in April. This was a pattern that had been building for years. And I had been the one smoothing it over, making excuses, telling Lily that Grandma Helen was just tired, that Uncle Marcus didn't mean it, that Nana Ruth was hard of hearing and hadn't meant to walk past her without saying hello. I had been lying to my daughter to protect people who did not deserve it. The party was at noon. I had rented the back room of a little restaurant downtown that had a garden patio. Lily had specifically requested somewhere with flowers. I spent the morning blowing up purple and yellow balloons, setting up a butterfly crack station, and picking up the cake from the bakery 3 blocks away. Lily wore a yellow dress she had chosen herself and kept running to the window to watch for cars. "Are they coming, Mommy?" she asked me at 11:40. "They said they would be here, sweetheart," I told her. At 12:15, 10 of the 11 kids from her class had arrived. Both neighbors were there. My college roommate had driven 2 hours to be there with her twins. Nana. Ruth had called that morning to say her hip was bothering her, and I had told her not to worry. We would visit her the following weekend. That was fine. That was understandable. But Helen and Gerald had confirmed. Marcus and Sandra had confirmed. Victor had confirmed and then disappeared to handle something at the office on a Saturday morning, and I had learned not to push on those particular disappearances. 12:30. Lily had stopped running to the window. At 12:45, I stepped outside to call Victor. It went to voicemail. I called Helen. She answered on the third ring, and in the background I could hear music. Not quiet background music. Party music. Glasses clinking. A group of people laughing at something someone had just said. "Helen," I said. "Lily's party started 45 minutes ago." There was a pause. A specific kind of pause that I had learned to recognize over 6 years. The pause that meant she was deciding how to frame something she had already decided to do. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, and the way she said sweetheart made my jaw tighten. "Victor didn't tell you. Gerald surprised Marcus with tickets to the Hendersons' anniversary party. You know how rare it is to get an invitation to the Hendersons. It was very last minute, we truly couldn't say no." I stood in the parking lot of that restaurant with balloons tied to my wrist and a phone pressed to my ear, and I did not say a single word for a very long time. "We'll make it up to Lily," Helen said. "Gerald will take her to the store this week, let her pick out something nice." I went back inside. Lily was standing at the craft table with her friend Piper, painting a wooden butterfly with orange and pink stripes. She looked up when I came in, and she smiled at me, and the smile had that particular quality that children's smiles get when they are trying not to show they are disappointed. Too wide. Held a second too long. "How about we cut the cake right now?" I said. I said it like it was a wonderful idea, like we had been building up to this exact moment, like this was the most exciting possible thing. And Lily's face cracked open into real joy, the unself-conscious kind, and she ran toward me and grabbed my hand. We cut the cake. I sang loudly and off-key to make her laugh. I helped 9 6-year-olds make butterfly wings out of tissue paper and pipe cleaners for 2 hours. I held it together until the last child was picked up, until the restaurant staff had started clearing the tables, until my roommate had hugged me goodbye and whispered, "You okay?" And I had said yes. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot and I cried for about 4 minutes. Not because of what Helen had done to me. Because of my daughter's smile. The one that was trying too hard. I drove home. Victor was there. He was on the couch watching a game, still in the clothes he'd been wearing that morning. "How was the party?" he asked. I looked at him for a long moment. "Your family didn't come?" "Yeah, my mom texted me, the Henderson thing came up." "She confirmed, Victor?" "Your parents confirmed, your brother confirmed." Lily kept going to the window to watch for them. He sighed the way someone sighs when they feel accused of something they believe should not count as a crime. "It's not like she'll remember." I want you to hold that sentence for a second. "It's not like she'll remember." Said about a 6-year-old child. His child. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the counter for a long time thinking. I had been covering for this family for 6 years. I had made excuses to my daughter, to my colleagues, to myself. I had been promoted to senior analyst 8 months ago, which meant I now consulted on restructuring assessments for distressed businesses, meaning companies that were failing and needed someone to come in, evaluate the full financial picture, and recommend either a recovery path or a controlled wind down. I was good at it. Very good at it. 3 weeks before Lily's birthday, I had been assigned to a new assessment. The client's name meant nothing to me when I opened the file. Crossfield Medical Logistics, Regional Distribution Company, significant debt load, declining contracts, ownership looking for options. I had been 12 hours into the assessment when I recognized the name of the founder on the incorporation documents. Gerald. Victor's father. I immediately disclosed the conflict of interest to my supervisor and offered to step off the case. My supervisor, a careful woman who had been doing this for 30 years, reviewed the situation and determined that because I had no financial stake in the outcome and no prior knowledge of the engagement, and because reassigning at this stage would cause significant delays for the client, I could continue under enhanced oversight protocols. I continued. What I found over the following 3 weeks was not surprising to me in the broad strokes, but was clarifying in its specifics. Crossfield Medical Logistics was in serious trouble. The debt was not the main problem. The main problem was a series of vendor contracts that had been restructured under terms that were, at best, extraordinarily unfavorable and, at worst, indicative of decisions made for reasons that had nothing to do with the company's financial health. I documented everything, every contract, every amendment, every approval signature. I wrote a 53-page preliminary assessment. I submitted it through proper channels and said nothing to Victor, nothing to Helen, nothing to anyone in his family. Then his family skipped my daughter's birthday party to attend a party for people who owned a vacation home in the Hamptons. On Monday morning, I went into the office and requested a meeting with my supervisor. I want to discuss the Crossfield timeline, I said. I think we should move to the formal presentation phase. I sent one email that afternoon to the full stakeholder group, including the legal representatives Gerald had retained. The email contained the preliminary findings and requested a formal meeting within 7 business days to discuss next steps. I want to be clear, I did not do anything improper. The assessment was accurate, the process was correct, and my professional obligation was to the integrity of the analysis. I had disclosed the conflict of interest. I had followed every protocol. I had done my job. But I would be lying if I said I did not feel a particular cold clarity, sitting at my desk on Monday morning after Lily's birthday weekend, when I hit send. The response came faster than I expected. Gerald's attorney called my firm's legal team within 48 hours. The call did not go the way they intended. My firm's legal team confirmed that my engagement was above board, that the findings had been reviewed by oversight, and that the meeting request stood. Victor found out through his father. He came home on Wednesday evening, and the version of him that walked through the door was one I recognized, the version that came out when his family had decided something, and he had been deputized to deliver it. My father says you're trying to destroy his company, Victor said. I'm assessing his company, that's my job. You knew it was his company. I disclosed it. Immediately. Ask my supervisor. This is about the birthday party. I looked at him. Victor, I am a senior analyst. I do not tank family businesses because my in-laws missed a 6-year-old's birthday party. I do my job correctly because my professional reputation is the thing I have worked for since before I met you. He left the room. I heard him in the kitchen on the phone with his father for a long time. The formal meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. Gerald arrived with his attorney and with Helen, which was unusual. Spouses rarely attended these sessions. I believe Helen's presence was strategic. She had a talent for a specific kind of social pressure, the kind that functions through implication and atmosphere rather than direct statement. She was very good at making rooms feel like she owned them. She walked in, looked at me across the conference table and said to the room at large, in a voice she pitched to Carrie, I don't know why she's involved in this. Everyone knows she has a personal grudge against our family. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when something inappropriate has just been said in a professional setting. My supervisor, seated to my left, said in a very even tone, Mrs. Calloway, this meeting has been convened to review a formal financial assessment. If you have concerns about the process, those should be directed to our compliance department in writing. Otherwise, we'd like to proceed. Helen sat down. We proceeded. I presented the findings. 45 minutes. I did not yell tutorialize, I did not raise my voice. I walked through every number, every contract, every discrepancy, the way I had been trained to do, with precision and without apology. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Gerald's attorney asked several technical questions. I answered them. My supervisor answered 2. Our legal counsel answered 1. At the end, Gerald's attorney asked to speak privately with his client. We stepped out. In the hallway, Helen found me. You are making a terrible mistake, she said. I'm presenting an accurate assessment, I said. You are doing this to hurt us. Because of a birthday party. Because you're petty and vindictive and you have always resented this family. I looked at her. She was wearing a cream blazer and pearl earrings and the expression of a woman who had never once been told that her behavior had consequences. Helen, I said, I have spent 6 years making excuses for this family to my daughter. I told her you were tired when you walked past her at Christmas without saying hello. I told her grandma had a lot going on when you forgot her kindergarten graduation. On her birthday, she stood at a window in a yellow dress and watched for your car for 45 minutes. She never said a word about it. I paused. I am not doing this to hurt you, but I am done protecting you from the results of how you operate. I went back into the conference room. The formal assessment was submitted 10 days later. The findings triggered a review by Crossfield's primary creditors. The controlled wind-down process began 6 weeks after that. Separately, and I want to be clear this was entirely separate, I filed for divorce. I had been thinking about it for longer than I was ready to admit, but sitting in my car in that parking lot on Lily's birthday, watching a text from Victor come through that said, "You okay? How was the party?" when he knew perfectly well how the party had been. I had felt something clarify inside me that I hadn't known was still murky. Victor contested the divorce. His family encouraged him to. Helen told him, through Marcus, that I was going to take everything, and he needed to fight. Gerald retained a family attorney for Victor as a gift, which I thought was either very generous or very revealing about who actually wanted to fight this. The custody hearing was the moment I told you about at the beginning. Victor's attorney made several arguments. One of them was that my work schedule was unpredictable and demanding, and therefore primary custody should default to Victor, who was, and this was the framing they used, in a period of professional recalibration. His startup had collapsed. The Crossfield assessment had nothing to do with that. It had been failing for years before I touched it, but the timing meant Victor's family was in a financially stressful period, and professional recalibration was the language they had chosen. Helen was seated in the gallery. At one point during a recess, she stood near the doorway and said to someone beside her, loudly enough for the waiting area to hear, "She's a fraud and everyone in this city knows it." I was sitting next to my attorney who had handled family law and civil litigation for 22 years. He looked at me and asked if I wanted to respond. I said no, because I knew what was coming. 3 weeks earlier, in the course of preparing for the custody case, my attorney had subpoenaed communication records relevant to parenting decisions and scheduling conflicts. Among the documents produced were a series of text messages between Victor, Helen, and Marcus from the day of Lily's birthday. In those messages, the decision to skip the party was not last minute. It was not about the Henderson anniversary event being unexpected. It had been discussed 4 days earlier. Helen had described the party as not worth rescheduling for, and Victor had responded with a thumbs-up emoji. A thumbs-up emoji. When Victor's attorney finished his argument about my demanding schedule, my attorney stood up. He presented the text messages, he presented my employment records, he presented a letter from my supervisor attesting to my professional conduct and the integrity of the Crossfield assessment. He presented 3 years of school records, pediatric appointments, parent-teacher conference attendance, and extracurricular scheduling, all showing who had been present and who had not. Then the judge looked at Victor's attorney and said, "Counselor, I've reviewed the communication records your opposing counsel has submitted. These messages indicate the decision to miss the child's birthday party was deliberate and premeditated. Does your client have a response to that?" Victor's attorney paused for a moment that lasted too long to be comfortable. "We'd like to request a brief recess," he said. The judge granted it. During that recess, Helen was escorted from the building by the bailiff after she attempted to approach my attorney in the hallway. I watched it happen from 15 feet away. She looked at me as she was guided toward the exit, and the expression on her face was something I hadn't seen there before. She looked surprised, like the world had behaved in a way she hadn't anticipated and didn't know how to account for. I turned back toward the courtroom and waited. Primary custody was awarded to me. Victor received structured visitation. Child support was ordered and calculated based on income. The documentation of deliberate absence from Lily's birthday was entered into the record and cited in the judge's findings as evidence of a pattern of deprioritizing the child's needs in favor of social and family obligations. That sentence, A pattern of deprioritizing the child's needs. I keep coming back to it. Not with satisfaction exactly. Something quieter than that. That evening, I picked Lily up from my roommate's house where she had spent the day. She was wearing a paper crown she'd made and carrying a drawing she wanted to show me. We drove home, and I made her favorite dinner, pasta with butter and parmesan, which she called plain noodles. And we sat at the kitchen table, and she told me about her day in the particular way 6-year-olds tell stories, with no internal logic and unlimited enthusiasm. Before bed, she asked me if Daddy was still going to come to her butterfly recital. Yes, I said, he'll be there. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her book. I sat in the hallway outside her room for a while after she fell asleep, listening to the quiet. I thought about the parking lot, the yellow dress, the window she kept running to. I thought about what it means to protect someone, really protect them, versus what it means to protect the idea of something. For years, I had been protecting the idea of her family, the shape of it, the way it looked from outside, because I thought that was what she needed. I had been wrong. What she needed was someone who would refuse to pretend that being dismissed was acceptable, someone who would hold the line quietly, completely, without drama, and let the truth do what truth eventually does when you stop covering for it. I run my own consulting practice now. I started it 8 months after the divorce was finalized. I named it after nothing in particular, just a word I liked, something that suggested small and green and persistent, things that come back every season regardless of weather. Lily is 7 now. She still draws butterflies. She is in a phase of asking why about absolutely everything, which I find exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Last month, she asked me why we don't see Grandma Helen anymore. I told her that sometimes people are better loved from a distance. She thought about that for a second. Like how you said the sun is beautiful but you shouldn't look at it directly. Exactly like that, I said. She seemed satisfied with that answer. She went back to her drawing. I poured my coffee and looked out the window at the morning, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, everything in the room felt exactly the right size,